Okay, there's also sort of some technological barriers. So let me just mention sort of how the internet comes in here. So it turns out that there's actually been a huge change in this area just in the last few years, and it came because of the Stimulus Act. In 2009, when the stimulus bill was passed, part of that bill was something called the High Tech Act, which was basically an act to promote healthcare IT. And it allocated about $20 billion and to be spent by the Department of Health and Human Services. And the basic idea of the High Tech Act is it creates a system of incentives for physicians to adopt electronic medical records. So if you adopt early, before 2014, you get paid just a cash payment, basically, for Medicare of, well, the amount can vary, but it can be up to $45,000. That's a substantial amount of money. And once 2015 comes around, Medicare will start docking your reimbursement. And actually, the penalties get fairly substantial, up to about 5% a few years beyond that. And so people, the current forecasts are that basically most physicians will have electronic medical records, within the next 5 or 10 years. Okay, so then the next question you would want to ask is, well, is this actually going to do anything? And one view of it is that, in fact, not on its own, it probably won't. And because if you think about something like, how did technology affect productivity in other sectors of the economy, it wasn't word processing that did it. It was the ability to communicate and the ability to aggregate data and use data and all of the complementary organizational changes that go with that, many of the things that Hal was talking about in his talk. And so in healthcare, what you would say is, well, what would you need? You would need something like some kind of network infrastructure where you could share, move data around, you could aggregate data, you could analyze data. And are you going to get that? And it turns out there's sort of two interesting challenges about trying to get there. One of them is technological, and the other one is economic. The technological challenge has to do with standardization, essentially, and creating essentially what Hal was talking about, a technological platform on which to do analysis and to exchange information, some kinds of standards. And the current way that people have gone about trying to do this in healthcare, by and large, is in a way that looks extremely funny if you come from Silicon Valley or from the technology sector. What they've essentially tried to do is think about ways to standardize the electronic record itself. That is, it would be like sort of saying, we're going to have the internet, but we're going to make everybody use a standard web page. Of course, if you think about how the internet works, you don't have a standardized web page. We have a standardized markup language that allows our computers to read anybody's web page. But the healthcare standards for medical records are not that way. They're not sort of markup standards. So they aren't, and because they're sort of standardized records, and the data is means the data is sort of almost by definition sort of captured in these records, in these sort of long text documents, as opposed to being marked up, tagged, so that computers can go in and extract information and do stuff with them. That's what computers are good at doing. They're good at extracting tagged data and doing stuff with them. So there's no way to index medical records in their current format. You can't have Google search the medical records in their current format, although I'm sure Google is working on it. Google is working on it, I'm sure. So that's the technological problem. Then there's an interesting economic problem, it turns out, which is how do you sort of come up with incentives to have people, to create a platform when individual providers view data as proprietary and want to keep it siloed? How do you create an open platform for innovation where that might disrupt the existing industry? And people have different views on that, but one view is that actually this is a place where there is a role for government to help create the platform. Other people might argue that this is an opportunity for businesses to develop that platform, but it almost certainly is going to require some kind of standardization that will allow data exchange and data flow, and then some kind of shift in the incentives. And I think that's one of the visions of this current initiative in government. I think this is going to be an interesting thing to see in the next couple of years, whether they move from just incentivizing people to switch to word processing from paper records to encouraging them to exchange records and use the internet to trigger innovation in healthcare.